"You old leech! No room for you!" That was the first thing I heard as I stepped through the front door of the beach house I built with my bare hands. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just looked at the woman standing in the middle of my living room, wearing my late husband's favorite blue shirt as if it belonged to her, a champagne flute in one hand and a smug smile in the other. My name is Verna Whitlow. I'm 72 years old, a retired civil engineer and the legal owner of this $10 million house by the sea. I built it stone by stone after losing my husband at 42. Every window, every brick, every railing was paid for with savings, sweat, and the painful sale of the only wedding ring I ever wore. And yet, there I stood, an unwelcome guest in my own sanctuary. I had come down to the beach for a quiet weekend. The fall weather was cooling just enough for long walks along the sand. I'd been looking forward to sitting in my old rocking chair on the back deck with a wool shawl and the sound of the waves for company. Instead, I found flashing lights, loud music, perfume-heavy strangers, and a punch bowl on the mahogany table I'd once varnished with my late husband, Rick. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, didn't even blink as she turned to her cousin and added, "Can you believe she just walks in like that? Honestly, Darren said she'd be staying in town, didn't he?" Her cousin, some man in shiny shoes I barely recognized, shrugged and laughed. "I wanted to rest at my $10 million beach house," I said quietly. "Didn't realize I needed to call ahead." Chloe's eyes gleamed. "This old leech again?" she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "There's no room for you here, Verna. We've got family staying. Real family." Real family. I took a breath, slow and careful. My gaze swept across the room. Every picture of me and Rick had been removed from the walls. My books were gone from the shelves. The Afghan blanket I always kept on the arm of the couch had been stuffed into a plastic bin, half open near the hallway. The smell of cheap potpourri masked the faint trace of cedarwood polish that had lived in the house for 20 years. And Chloe stood there like a hostess, her own mother lounging on the sunroom chaise, sipping from one of my crystal glasses like she owned the coastline. "I'll just get my things," I said, as calmly as I could. "Oh no," Chloe said, stepping in front of me. "This isn't just a drop-by, Verna. You can't come in and out whenever you feel like it. Darren and I talked. This house is ours now. He said you agreed." I stared at her. "I agreed?" "Yes," she said too quickly. "You told him, remember, that we could settle here, long term. It's been over 6 months since you were last here. We figured you were done." She gave me that rehearsed, pitying smile. "Honestly, it's not healthy for you to cling to this place. It just keeps you stuck in the past." "You mean the past where I worked 40 years and paid every mortgage bill with my name on it?" I asked. "Don't make this a scene," Chloe said, then lowered her voice and leaned in. "Just leave quietly and let the younger generation enjoy it. It's not like you can climb those stairs anymore anyway." I could have said a lot of things. I could have raised my voice. I could have demanded to see Darren, but instead, I looked around one more time. I saw Chloe's mother, Nina, now joined by someone who looked like a realtor, Tyler, if I remembered correctly, the kind who shows up whenever someone smells money that doesn't belong to them. My name was nowhere in the air. My presence was an inconvenience. So I smiled. Just once. The kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes but holds every promise of what's to come. Because if Chloe thought calling me a leech was the end of the story, she had no idea what I was about to do next. The legal nightmare I unleashed cost her everything. Before I left, I paused at the edge of the kitchen. On the counter, there was a wine bottle I'd kept sealed since Rick passed, vintage 1982. It was a gift from his boss when Rick earned his first promotion. It had sat untouched for decades in our cabinet, never opened. It was now uncorked, half empty with 2 lipstick-stained glasses beside it. That was the moment something inside me, quiet, grieving, tolerant, locked itself away. I turned without another word and stepped back out into the golden light of the afternoon. The seagulls were still circling the shoreline like nothing had happened, but everything had changed. If you've ever been called something cruel by someone who married into your family, if you've ever been treated like a burden in a house you built with your own hands, then stay with me. Because this isn't a story about losing your place. It's a story about claiming it back, with dignity, with law, and with a calm the world never expects. And sometimes, the calmest storms do the most damage. I checked into a modest seaside inn 3 miles from the house. No ocean view, no rocking chair, just a narrow bed and the smell of lemon disinfectant in the air. The receptionist looked surprised when I paid in cash and asked for a room on the quiet end of the hall. I told her I was only staying for a night, maybe 2. In truth, I didn't know how long I'd be there. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, not because it didn't feel like the floor had been pulled out from beneath me, but because I'd lived too long, survived too much, to fall apart over one insult, even if it came in my own living room. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my purse. At the bottom, folded carefully between a book of stamps and an old photograph of Rick in his uniform, was the deed to the beach house. Still crisp, still legally binding, still bearing my name alone. I could almost hear Rick's voice in my head, the way he used to say, paperwork first, emotions second. We bought the lot together in 1989 after the company I worked for finished constructing a dam out near Shasta Lake. It was my first major contract as a licensed civil engineer. Rick had just switched clinics, working extra shifts as a vet to save for the down payment. I remember the day we first drove out to the coast, a rusted pickup, a thermos of coffee, and a sky so blue it made you dizzy. There was no house then, just sand, wild grass, and the sound of possibility. We brought camping chairs and sat for hours, planning where the front porch would face, what kind of windows would catch the morning light. When Rick died suddenly from a stroke 13 years later, I poured everything we had left into building it on my own. I sold his boat, I sold the gold bracelet he gave me for our 20th anniversary, and I sold my wedding ring. That one broke me. It was a simple gold band, nothing fancy, slightly scratched from years of gardening, cooking, and drafting designs late into the night. But it had been his, and then mine, and then ours. The day I let it go, I walked into the pawn shop with my head high. The clerk offered me a fraction of its worth. I nodded, handed it over, and used the cash to pay the contractors for the roof installation. After that, every tile, beam, and nail in the house felt like an act of devotion, not just to him, but to the life we built and the promise that I wouldn't let it crumble just because he was gone. Now, as I sat in that cramped motel room, staring at that folded deed, I felt the weight of those decades settle into my chest. Not sadness, not bitterness, resolve. Chloe had taken over the house like it was a hotel. She paraded her relatives through my kitchen, wore my clothes, drank from my glasses, and tossed my memories into trash bags like they were leftovers. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know the zoning codes I'd fought to preserve when the county tried to seize the beachfront. She didn't know about the easement battle we won in 2003 that kept our privacy intact. She didn't know the layout of the pipes beneath the deck or the names of the retired inspectors who helped me reinforce the foundation. And she certainly didn't know the law. I reached for my phone, then stopped. Not yet. This needed more than anger. It needed patience. I folded the deed and placed it back into my purse, next to the photo of Rick. He was smiling, one eyebrow raised like he always did when he was trying not to laugh. "You'd have hated her," I whispered. Outside, the wind picked up. I pulled the curtains back and saw the faint outline of the ocean on the horizon. It was there, steady and wide and waiting. The house may have been under siege, but the land remembered me, and I remembered every brick of it. The next morning, I returned. Not to take back the house, not yet, but to see it with my own eyes in daylight, to know if, What I had felt the day before had been real, or just the cruel trick of exhaustion. It wasn't a trick. As I pulled up the gravel driveway, I saw 3 unfamiliar cars parked where my rose bushes used to be. The gate to the side patio stood wide open, dragging slightly in the breeze. From inside, I could already hear music, something fast, synthetic, and too loud for morning hours. Chloe's voice carried through the open windows. She was laughing. I rang the bell. No one answered. I knocked once, firm, clear, and stepped inside without waiting. It was still my house. Nina was the first to spot me from the kitchen. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered, setting down her mimosa with a clink. "Didn't you get the message yesterday?" "I did," I said, "but it seems I left some things behind." "Everything's boxed," she replied, barely meeting my gaze. "Tyler said you could pick it up next week." I looked past her toward the hallway. "Where is Chloe?" "Busy," Nina snapped. "Hosting. Entertaining. Unlike some people, she knows how to make use of a home." I walked past her, ignoring the stares from Chloe's relatives lounging in my sunroom, feet propped on the coffee table Rick built with his own hands. The hallway smelled like someone had sprayed cheap air freshener over damp towels. The door to my bedroom was cracked open, and there she was, Chloe, standing at my dresser, humming softly as she adjusted a string of pearls around her neck. My pearls. The ones Rick gave me for our anniversary dinner the year before he passed. But it wasn't the necklace that broke me. It was the silk blouse. Pale, lilac, hand-stitched. A gift from my sister Vivian brought back from Kyoto after her trip. Chloe wore it now, tucked into a pair of crisp white trousers, looking like she belonged in an ad for seaside real estate. I stepped forward. "That blouse doesn't belong to you." She turned, startled, then smirked. "Neither does this house." I stared at her. "You know very well it does." She tilted her head. "Does it? Because according to Darren, you've had some lapses. Confusion. He said you left a note, told him to manage things while you got help." "What note?" She rolled her eyes. "You really want to do this now, with people downstairs?" I walked over to the dresser and opened the drawer. Empty. Every scarf, every folded memory, gone. I stepped to the closet. My clothes, missing. Only Chloe's remained, lined up like they'd always lived there. I moved to the bathroom. My toiletries had been dumped into a cardboard box near the trash can. My toothbrush bent, my robe crumpled. "What did you do with my things?" I asked quietly. "They're in bags," she said, casual as ever. "In the garage. We needed space." I turned back toward her. "You had no right." She crossed her arms. "Darren gave me every right. And since he's your only child, I think it's time you accepted a few things. You don't live here anymore, Verna. You're not capable of managing a property like this. You've had your time." I was silent. "Don't look so shocked," she added. "Honestly, I'm doing you a favor. I've made this place beautiful. People come here now, they laugh, they enjoy themselves. You just sat in that rocking chair, staring at the ocean like a ghost." A door slammed somewhere below. I heard Tyler's voice calling out about a delivery truck, then Nina laughing. I walked over to the closet again. In the far back, I found a small box labeled Misk Old Lady. My throat tightened. Inside, my sewing kit, the church bulletin from the week Rick passed, a photo of Darren at 10, missing one front tooth, and tucked underneath, stuffed like garbage, was my wedding album. The corners were bent, a few pages torn. Chloe didn't bother to look ashamed. "Do yourself a favor," she said, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "Get a nice apartment in town. There's one near the rec center. We can help cover rent if that's what this is about." I put the album back in the box and looked at her for a long moment. "You've made your intentions clear," I said. She smiled again. Finally. As I turned to leave, I passed the hall where children were playing with beach towels like they were capes. One of them ran into me. He looked confused, then called out, "Who's the grandma?" No one answered. No one corrected him. I left the house not with rage, but with something colder, something precise. There was no point in arguing with Chloe or Nina. I wasn't going to beg my son to speak for me. They wanted me erased, so I would start collecting every trace of what they hoped to forget, and I wouldn't raise my voice once. That night, I waited until the lights dimmed in the house. From the bluff above, I could just make out the glow of string lights draped across the back porch. My porch. Laughter spilled out occasionally, paired with the clink of wine glasses and the faint chords of some playlist that didn't belong to this place. I moved quietly along the side fence, where the old garden gate had warped slightly with the salty air over the years. I used to oil the hinges every spring. Chloe hadn't. It groaned, but not loud enough to draw attention. Inside, the house smelled different now. Not bad, just foreign. Too much perfume and lemon wax. I walked on the balls of my feet, following muscle memory past the guest bathroom and up the narrow staircase to the master bedroom. There, the moonlight filtered through the lace curtains I had sewn with Rick's mother during one long summer. Chloe hadn't taken them down yet. Maybe she thought they gave the room character. I went straight to the closet. Behind the dresses that weren't mine and the shoes I'd never wear, the small built-in cabinet was still there, painted the same off-white as the walls. It was a custom piece Rick and I had added to hide emergency cash, spare keys, and any documents too important to leave lying around. I reached up to the lip of the molding and slid my fingers underneath, but it was already open. The lock, old and discreet, had been forced. The edge of the wood was splintered. I crouched low, opened the door slowly, and found the contents ransacked. The envelope that once held our original deed was torn open and empty. A second folder, marked Medical and Legal Private, lay crumpled in the back. Inside were 3 sheets of paper I didn't recognize. The first, a signed medical report claiming I exhibited early signs of cognitive decline, dated just 6 weeks ago. The second, a notarized letter transferring long-term property management to Darren Whitlow due to health-related limitations. The third, a typed unsigned memo listing estimated values for assets currently under consolidation. At the bottom, someone had scribbled in pen, "If we sell quickly, this could clear $9 or Tyler." My hand trembled. The medical report was signed by a doctor I'd never visited, Dr. Evan C. Harkness. I took a photo of it with my phone, then searched his name. It took less than a minute to find the disciplinary record. He'd lost hospital privileges 2 years ago for falsifying patient evaluations as part of a disability claim fraud ring. And now, his name was on a document claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my own home. I sat back on the carpet, letting the weight of it settle. Chloe hadn't just insulted me. She hadn't just boxed my memories. She had prepared to erase me, on paper in legal terms, with signatures and dates and a plan. And Darren had signed. I knew his handwriting. I taught him how to write his name letter by letter on the back porch table while Rick cooked burgers and the dogs barked at seagulls. I'd recognize that curve of the D anywhere. But more than betrayal, what settled in my chest was clarity. They weren't playing games anymore. They were stealing. Not just things, but my name, my agency, my story. I took photos of everything. The fake report, the memo, the scratch lock. Then I carefully folded the memo into my coat pocket. I'd need more than memory to make this stick. As I rose, I glanced around the room once more. Everything looked pristine, curated. Not a thing out of place, except for me. I moved to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Empty. I tried the second. There, nestled between Chloe's scarves, was my wedding photo, stuffed without a frame, bent at one corner. Rick looked out from the image, young and kind in the suit we had rented because we couldn't afford to buy one. His eyes seemed to catch mine in the dark, asking nothing but seeing everything. I slipped the photo into my coat and walked to the window. Downstairs, someone opened a fridge. A bottle cap rolled across tile. Laughter again. I looked up at the ceiling for a moment, then whispered, "You picked the wrong woman to push out." Then I left the house, the way I came, in silence, but not empty-handed. The next morning, I drove inland to a quiet brick office just off the main square of Millersfield, a town too small for traffic lights but big enough to remember names. The gold-lettered sign outside hadn't changed in 20 years. Boone Collier, Esker Estate and Property Law, retimagine. The door creaked as I stepped inside, triggering the familiar jingle of a bell that had greeted my husband countless times. The place still smelled faintly of tobacco and pine cleaner. Legal books lined the shelves in tidy rows, and an old filing cabinet sat like a sentry in the back corner. Behind the desk sat a man who looked older, thinner, but still sharp. Boone. He looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Well, I'll be damned. Verna Whitlow." I gave a small smile. "Still ruining your mornings with puzzles and black coffee?" "Only when there aren't any thieves to chase," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "You hear about Darren?" I paused. "What makes you ask that?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "Because I heard from the county clerk's office that someone filed a health delegation under your name last month. And I also happen to know you're not the type to hand over power of attorney unless you're dying, which you're clearly not." "I have the papers," I said, placing my phone on the table. "I took photos last night. Fake medical report, forged memo. Someone tried to transfer property management to Darren, and they're planning to sell the house, fast." Boone squinted at the screen, flipping through each image carefully. "Harkness?" he muttered. "Oh, this guy's a cockroach. Last I checked, he was running wellness assessments out of a strip mall behind a vape shop." He tapped the screen. "And this memo, Tyler Baxter? That name's come across my desk before. He tried to push a forged sale contract through a nursing home case I was advising on. Claims to be a realtor, but all he really does is sniff around for vulnerable properties." I sat quietly while Boone pulled a yellow legal pad from a drawer and began scribbling notes in his slanted handwriting. He worked slowly, lips pressed tight in thought. "When Rick got sick," I said softly, "you helped us fight the county over that water dispute. You helped us keep the land." "I remember," Boone said, "and I remember you drafting your own zoning appeal when they tried to force a road expansion through your front yard." "That house," I began, then stopped. "It's not just wood and stone. It's my whole life, and they're tearing it apart like I'm already in the ground." Boone looked up. "Then let's remind them who still owns the deed." He stood and walked over to the file cabinet, pulling out a thin red folder. Inside were copies of the original property grant, the updated title documents, and the zoning, paperwork from the year Rick died. He laid them on the table like cards in a poker game. "I kept copies," he said, smiling faintly. "Figured I'd need them one day." I blinked back something behind my eyes. "What's our move?" I asked. He slid the documents toward me. "First, we get a certified copy of this title. Second, we file a fraud complaint with the property registrar. Third, we get a civil injunction to block any sale activity until we settle the power of attorney issue. And fourth," he paused, tilting his head, "we collect witnesses." "Greta," I said immediately. "My neighbor. She saw Chloe inviting strangers into the house, showing them around. She even mentioned video." "Perfect," Boone nodded. "We'll need all of that, emails, texts, photos, anything showing they treated the house like it was theirs without consent." "They moved my things," I said. "Threw them out, wore my clothes, used my husband's name like a key to unlock my life." Boone looked me in the eye. "Then let's change the locks." He stood up and reached into a drawer, pulling out a business card. "I'm retired, but I still have friends in the system. A notary, a former title clerk, and one bulldog of a county investigator who owes me a favor. We'll keep this clean, tight, and by the book." I nodded. "Verna," he added gently, "you do realize this might get ugly. Chloe may come after you legally. Darren may deny everything. You ready for that?" I was called a leech in my own home, I said calmly. They've already made it ugly. Boone gave a short nod. Then we'll make it lawful. As I stood to leave, he added, one more thing. Don't go back in the house alone. Not again. If they catch wind you're onto them, they'll bury the rest of the evidence. We'll do this right, with witnesses and process. I took the yellow folder he'd prepared and clutched it like armor. They thought I'd disappear, I said. They forgot, Boone replied. You know how to build foundations that last. Outside, the sun had risen higher, casting sharp light across the sidewalk. I looked out toward the west, toward the place I once called home. It wasn't just a property anymore. It was a battlefield, and I had just hired the best man for the war. Greta Miles answered the door, still wearing her gardening gloves. Her silver hair was tucked into a wide-brimmed straw hat, and flecks of potting soil clung to her sleeves. She blinked twice in surprise, then smiled with something more like recognition than politeness. Verna, she said warmly, I was wondering when you'd come. I was hoping we could talk, I said. Do you have a minute? For you, always. She pushed the door open wider. Come in. Don't mind the mess. Spring came late and these tomatoes won't plant themselves. Her house smelled like lavender and lemon balm, just as it had for the past 20 years. The same floral quilt still hung over the back of her couch, and on her hallway wall, tucked beside a photo of her grandchildren, was a picture of me and Rick from the neighborhood block party years ago. I hadn't realized she'd kept it. She poured us both tea and sat at the kitchen table across from me. So, she said gently, this about the house? I nodded. You've seen what's going on? Greta sighed. Verna, I've lived next to you for more than 2 decades. I've seen a lot, but nothing like what Chloe's been doing. She stood and walked to a small cabinet by the window. From a drawer, she pulled out a small black USB drive. I didn't know what to do with this, she said. Didn't feel right turning it over to the police without talking to you first. She handed it to me. What is it? Security footage. My front camera faces your driveway and I've got a side angle that covers most of your deck. I caught Chloe showing the house to people who weren't family at least 3 times this month. I felt my breath catch. Are you sure? She gave them a tour, Greta said flatly. Talked like she owned the place. I heard her say it was available soon. One man had a clipboard. Looked like a buyer or a broker. I closed my eyes for a second. She's moving faster than we thought. There's more, Greta said. I also saw them bring in a storage truck 2 days ago. I think they moved out more of your things. Books, paintings, even that little bench Rick carved. My throat tightened. She threw out Rick's bench? Greta reached over and placed a hand over mine. I thought about saying something, but I figured, if I waited, you'd come back, and we'd handle it right. I'm already working with Boone, I said. We're building the case. But this video could be what makes it stick. Greta's expression shifted, firmer now. Verna, she's not just inconsiderate. She's dangerous. She's clever in the worst kind of way. Calculating, performative. When you're around, she acts just polite enough to throw people off. But when she thinks no one's watching, she lets it slip. I looked at the small drive in my hand, amazed that something so light could carry so much weight. She said I wasn't real family, I whispered. Greta scoffed. Well, that's rich, because family doesn't lie on your behalf to seize your home. They don't throw your photos in bins or rewrite your story to make you disposable. She told the children I was just visiting, I said, like a neighbor who came uninvited. You built that house, Greta said, voice rising. You designed it. You lived in it with love. She can redecorate every surface, but she can't change the fact that it remembers you. I felt a heat rise in my chest. Not anger exactly. Something quieter but sharper, like steel being drawn, not swung. I need your statement, I said. Would you be willing to give one to Boone? Gladly, Greta said. I'll print the video stills, too. They've got timestamps. You'll need that. I don't want this to become ugly, I said softly. Greta shook her head. Verna, it already is, but you're not making it that way. You're just choosing not to disappear. I stood to leave, clutching the USB like a lifeline. As I reached the door, Greta called after me. Verna? I turned. She doesn't know who she's up against, she said, but I do. I nodded once, grateful in a way I couldn't yet put into words. Outside, the breeze had shifted. The ocean smelled closer now, saltier, more real. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel alone in the fight. I didn't expect Darren to come alone. But there he was, standing on the curb outside the inn where I was staying, holding a paper cup of coffee in one hand and glancing down at his shoes like a schoolboy waiting for the principal. I stepped outside and said nothing, just looked at him, let the silence do the work. He finally looked up. Mom, he said, voice tight, can we talk? I nodded once and gestured toward the weathered bench under the shade of a sycamore. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and the ocean beyond. He sat at one end, I sat at the other. We didn't speak for a long moment. Chloe told me you've been upset, he began. I raised an eyebrow. Upset? She said you've been showing up unexpectedly, making accusations. I cut him off. Darren, let's not pretend. I saw the papers, the fake medical report, the transfer letter, your signature. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, then dropped again. I let the silence stretch, and then, was it worth it? He rubbed his face with both hands. I didn't want it to happen like this. But you let it. I was trying to keep things together, he said, the words coming faster now. Chloe, she's under pressure. Her mom moved in and the kids needed space and the clinic closed. So, you gave them my house, I said, calm, cold, and you signed a form that said I was mentally unfit to manage my own life. His voice dropped. You weren't supposed to find out. That's the part that bothers you? He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something raw in his face. Not arrogance, not dismissal, shame. I thought you'd be okay, he said. I thought maybe you'd move in with Aunt Vivian or find a senior place. I didn't think you'd fight it. That's the problem, Darren. You didn't think I'd fight. He blinked, stung. I worked my whole life, I continued, my voice steady. Your father and I poured every dime we had into that home. I lost him, but I kept the house. It was the one thing that still felt like ours, like family, and you gave it away like it was nothing. He shifted, uncomfortably. It's just a house, Mom. No, I said sharply. It's not. It's where your father and I sat on the porch and planned your future. It's where I waited up through every fever, every broken curfew. It's where we celebrated your scholarship and cried when you almost dropped out. That house isn't just walls. It's everything I've carried alone since the day he died. He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. I didn't ask you for help. I didn't burden you. I didn't even tell you when I pawned my wedding ring to pay for repairs after the flood. And still, I never treated you like a tenant in your own life. His face crumpled a little, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. I didn't know how to stop it, he said. Chloe was so sure you wouldn't care, or that you'd be better off not having the stress. She said we'd take care of you. No, Darren, I said quietly. She said you'd take control of me. He swallowed hard. You could have called, I added. You could have looked me in the eye before signing that paper, but you didn't. And now you're here not because you're sorry, but because you're scared. He didn't deny it. I turned slightly, looking toward the road. Do you remember what Dad always said when we lied to cover our tracks? He nodded, voice barely a whisper. A lie doesn't fix what courage could have prevented. I nodded. You didn't have courage, Darren. You had convenience. He took a shaky breath. So what happens now? I stood. Now? The law happens. Boone's filing the injunction today. Chloe can't sell the house. The power of attorney is being challenged, and the videos Greta gave me show more than enough evidence of misrepresentation. Darren looked like the wind had been knocked out of him. "But what about us?" he asked, almost desperate. "You and me?" I paused. "If I had died," I said slowly, "would you have come to my funeral? Or just handed over the keys?" He didn't answer. I nodded, more to myself than to him. That's what I thought. I walked away before I lost the strength in my legs, and behind me, Darren didn't call out. He didn't run after me. He just sat there on the bench, holding a cup of coffee gone cold. 2 days later, the sun rose over the coast like nothing had happened. Waves rolled in slow and steady. A breeze carried the smell of salt and jasmine through the neighborhood, and Chloe was back in hostess mode, her voice bright and sugary as she welcomed another guest into my home. She had no idea that the man she was about to impress wasn't a real investor. He was an old friend of Boone's, a retired county notary with a sharp memory, a hidden body cam, and the patience of a fisherman. From the park bench across the street, I watched as he stepped into my front door, clipboard in hand. Boone sat beside me, casually sipping his iced tea and pretending to read the paper. "She's 10 minutes late," Boone muttered, not looking up. "She's making him wait," I replied. "She wants him to feel like the house is in high demand." Boone smirked. Classic amateur tactic. Across the street, the front door finally opened wide, and Chloe stepped out onto the porch wearing a crisp linen dress and wedges far too tall for comfort. She extended her arm with a flourish, like she was unveiling a showpiece. "Here we are," she said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. 5 bedrooms, ocean view, fully upgraded kitchen. It's been in the family a long time, but we're downsizing. "Are you the owner?" the notary asked, his voice polite but curious. "Well," Chloe chuckled, "technically it's still in my mother-in-law's name, but she's in no condition to manage things. Early dementia, unfortunately. We've had to step in." I felt Boone's jaw tighten beside me, but I kept my eyes on the house. "She lives here now?" the man asked. "Oh no," Chloe waved it off. "She's in a facility, or was. Not sure where she is now, honestly, but we've been managing the property for months." She led him inside, and the door clicked shut. Boone tapped his watch. "We'll give him 20. He said he'd ask about the title, about her legal authority, and whether any family disputes existed." "She'll lie," I said flatly, "which is why we're recording." The minutes passed like stones sinking in a pond. I didn't speak. I just watched the house, the windows, the place that still looked like mine even though I hadn't slept there in weeks. I wondered if Chloe had touched Rick's fishing gear or thrown away the old chessboard in the study. I wondered if she had even noticed the tiny initials we carved into the back porch rail, the ones Darren traced when he was 5. Then finally, the front door opened again. Chloe stepped out with the notary, smiling wide, shaking his hand. "Just let us know if you're interested," she said cheerfully. "We have other buyers lined up, so—" "Of course," he replied. "Thank you for the tour." He walked casually down the path, then turned the corner. Boone stood up beside me. "That's our cue." 10 minutes later, we met in the parking lot behind the cafe on Main Street. The notary opened his briefcase and placed the recorder gently in Boone's palm. "She lied," he confirmed. "Said you were mentally incapacitated. Said she had full legal control. I asked about the title. She said it was already being transferred." Boone nodded. "And did she offer a price?" 9.2, he replied. "Said she could go lower if it closed fast." I closed my eyes and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "She's trying to cash in before we can stop her," I said. Boone turned to the notary. "We'll need that audio transcripted. Can you notarize the statement?" "Already started it," he said. "Should have everything filed by tonight." As he packed up, Boone turned to me. "Next step is the injunction. We'll submit the audio, the video from Greta, and the forged documents. Once the court sees that she's misrepresenting ownership and attempting to sell without consent, we'll freeze all transactions tied to the property. And Chloe? Boone smiled grimly. We'll see how she hosts from a courtroom bench. As we parted ways, I stood for a moment outside the cafe, letting the wind tug gently at my coat. The sky above was clear, too beautiful for a day so filled with quiet war. But I didn't feel heavy. I felt ready. I had no need for screaming matches or slammed doors. I had facts. I had the law. I had people who remembered who I was and what I'd built. And now I had proof. Let her throw another party. I was about to send the guest list straight to the court. It was a Saturday afternoon when the plan came to life. Clear skies, salt in the air, and just enough breeze to make the white curtains in the living room flutter like they were waving goodbye. From the sidewalk, my house looked perfect. It always did from the outside. But inside, the rot was setting in. Chloe had planned another party. This one was smaller, just close friends and potential buyers, according to Greta, who'd seen a group of sharply dressed people step through the front gate with gift bags and real estate folders. Someone had catered finger sandwiches. Someone else brought wine in gold-foiled bottles. There were coasters on my oak table now, as if pretending to care for what you've stolen made it yours. Boone and I arrived together in a county vehicle. We didn't knock. We didn't call ahead. We came with paperwork. And we didn't come alone. 2 uniformed deputies from the sheriff's office flanked us, calm but firm. One held a clipboard, the other carried a small recorder. Just behind them, a woman in a neat gray suit followed silently. A court-appointed process server and notary. Everything was legal. Everything was logged. Everything was about to change. The moment we stepped through the front door, the music stopped. Chloe stood at the center of the living room, flanked by her mother, Nina, and that ever-present cousin Tyler, who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a mid-tier investment brochure. The guests froze, mid-sip and mid-laugh. One woman looked like she wanted to vanish into the wallpaper. "What is this?" Chloe demanded. "Who are they?" Boone stepped forward. "My name is Boone Collier, legal counsel representing Verna Whitlow. This is Deputy Lawson and Deputy Miller, and this is Ms. Keene from the county notary office. We're here to serve formal notice." He handed Chloe a thick envelope. She didn't take it. So the notary did, and placed it gently on the kitchen counter next to a cheese platter. I stepped in behind Boone, slowly, carefully. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "This house," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "is not for sale. It has never been transferred, and any documents claiming otherwise are fraudulent." Chloe's face flushed deep red. "You can't just barge in here. This is harassment. You're unstable." "On the contrary," Boone cut in, "we have video and audio evidence that you misrepresented ownership of this property, attempted to solicit sale offers under false pretenses, and have knowingly presented forged medical documentation to justify unlawful occupancy." Deputy Lawson unfolded a document. "By order of the county court, all sales activity regarding this property is hereby suspended. No further open houses, showings, or negotiations are permitted until legal ownership is verified through formal process. Ms. Chloe Whitlow, you are being served with an injunction." "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "Darren signed—" "Darren doesn't own the deed," I replied, "and neither do you." Tyler stepped forward, half smiling. "Look, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." "You can discuss that with the district attorney," Boone replied, cold as ice. "Your name appears on a valuation memo found among documents falsely claiming my client had cognitive decline. That memo includes a projected profit for a sale you had no authority to complete." The room fell into silence. The guests began to back toward the door. "Wait," Chloe called out. "You don't understand. We've been taking care of this place for her. It's not like she even lives here anymore." "I would have," I said, "if my bed hadn't been thrown out. if my clothes hadn't been bagged and shoved into the garage, if you hadn't told my neighbors I was too confused to function. Nina finally spoke, stepping in. She's exaggerating. Verna, this is a mistake. Don't do this. Think about Darren. Think about your family. I am, I said quietly. I'm thinking about the years I stayed silent. The nights I kept the lights on waiting for a son who never came. The time I fixed the plumbing myself because I didn't want to bother anyone. And I'm thinking about how silence bought me nothing but eviction from my own life. Chloe stormed across the room and slammed her hand on the envelope. I won't be humiliated like this. You want war? Fine. I'll sue you for emotional distress, for defamation. Deputy Miller held up a hand. Ma'am, you're advised not to interfere with a legal injunction. Continued resistance may lead to temporary detainment. You're threatening me now? She snapped. No, ma'am, he said evenly. We're informing you of the law. At that moment, another officer stepped in from the back door, speaking quietly to Boone. Boone turned to me. Tyler's car is gone. He left 20 minutes ago. Looks like he caught wind. Of course he did, I muttered. He's always known when to disappear. Chloe's hands trembled. You don't get to do this. You're just some bitter old woman clinging to a house like it's the only thing she has. I looked her in the eye. It's not the house I'm clinging to. It's the truth, and you can't stage over that. The deputies handed Chloe one final notice and instructed her to vacate all efforts to market or present the house for sale. She didn't respond, just stood there, shoulders tight, mouth pressed into a line. As we walked back toward the front door, I turned one last time to face her. I built this place, I said. I survived for it. I sacrificed for it. And I'll be damned if I let you take it just because I didn't scream sooner. Outside, the sun was high. The sea glinted like glass. Boone exhaled slowly. That was the cleanest takedown I've seen in years. It's not over, I said. Not yet. He nodded. But the tide's turning. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the ground beneath my feet again, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as the woman who still owned the keys. Nina came to see me the next morning. She didn't call ahead. She just showed up at the inn with red eyes, a box of store-bought cookies, and a trembling hand that clutched her purse like it might run away without her. I didn't invite her in. We sat outside on the front bench beneath the awning. A light drizzle had started, soft enough to miss the edges of my sleeves. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did and didn't care. She began, then paused, searching for the right tone. I wanted to say, I didn't know things would get this far. I stayed quiet. I thought Chloe was just taking a bit of control, Nina went on. Organizing, tidying up. She's always been assertive. I didn't realize she'd start doing legal things, signing things. She didn't do it alone, I said calmly. Nina flinched a little, but she nodded. I know, I encouraged her. I thought, maybe it was better for everyone. You're older, you live alone, and Darren's been so stressed with the kids, and... You thought I was alone, I corrected. That I'd be quiet. That I'd just slip away like an old photograph in a drawer? She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, filled with every unsaid excuse. Every afternoon, Chloe rolled her eyes behind my back. Every time Nina poured herself a glass of wine from my cabinet without asking. I came to ask you to drop the charges, she finally said, voice cracking. Please, Chloe's falling apart. Her reputation, her license. If the medical fraud stays on record, she could be barred from nursing jobs for life. She lied about my mental state to seize a home, I said. A home she had no legal claim to. She wore my clothes. She told strangers I was too far gone to notice. And she did it all with your blessing? She was just trying to protect her family, Nina whispered. I am her family, I said quietly. Or I was. Nina opened the cookie box and offered it to me, like sugar might erase betrayal. I didn't take one. "She's begging for another chance," Nina said, "and I am too. We made mistakes, but lawsuits, investigations, it could ruin her future." I looked out at the parking lot. Rain was beginning to gather in tiny puddles across the asphalt. "You want me to make this go away?" "I'm asking for mercy," she said. I turned to her, my voice steady. "I've already given you more than you deserve. I haven't pressed criminal charges. I haven't asked for restitution beyond what the court orders. I haven't told every newspaper in this town what you did. I've stayed quiet, Nina, quieter than most would." She blinked fast, lips trembling. "But I won't erase what happened," I said. "I won't pretend your daughter's actions were harmless, or that mine were an overreaction." "So that's it?" "No," I said. "You'll still see the consequences. You just won't see me scream about them." I stood, brushed a few drops of rain from my coat. "Tell Chloe the law is speaking now, not me. I've said all I need to say." Nina rose too, slowly, like something heavy had shifted inside her. She looked at me one last time. "I suppose I deserve that," she said. I nodded once. "Yes, you do." She walked away with the cookie box still full, and I stood beneath the soft gray sky, breathing in the air of a world where silence was no longer weakness. It was clarity. I found Darren sitting on the porch swing the next evening. I hadn't seen him arrive, hadn't heard a car. He must have walked, maybe parked somewhere down the street to avoid drawing attention. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the veranda, painting everything in shades of amber and regret. He looked thinner, paler, like the weeks had drained him, not just from sleep, but from certainty. His hands were folded in his lap, fidgeting with something small, something I couldn't see yet. I stepped out slowly and closed the screen door behind me. He didn't stand. He just looked up. "Hi, Mom." I gave him a nod and sat at the far end of the swing. The wood creaked under my weight, familiar and grounding. The same creak Rick used to complain about but never fixed. For a while, we just sat. The breeze carried the smell of jasmine from the garden. Somewhere down the coast, wind chimes stirred faintly. Neither of us rushed the silence. Finally, Darren spoke. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I didn't reply. "I just wanted to see you before—" He hesitated. "Before everything else happens." "You mean before the court finishes doing what you helped start?" He winced. "I know." The object in his hand shifted. He held it up between us. It was my wedding ring. The one I had sold decades ago, years after Rick passed, when the roof had caved in and insurance wouldn't cover it. I stared at it, stunned. "I found it," he said. "It took weeks. I traced the pawn shop records, found the reseller, then finally got to a man who collects vintage rings. He remembered the engraving." I reached out and took it from his palm. It was duller now, the shine worn off with time and strangers. But the engraving inside, R&V, one life, one plan, was still there, still ours. "I wanted to give it back," he said. "I thought maybe it would mean something." I held the ring lightly between my fingers. "Why now?" "Because I've been thinking about Dad, and you, and everything we used to have." He swallowed. "And because Chloe's gone." My head turned sharply. "She left," he said. "Moved in with her cousin in Sacramento. Said she couldn't stay in a place where she wasn't welcome. Said I should decide what kind of man I want to be." "And what did you decide?" He looked down at his hands. "That I don't want to be the man who stood by while his mother was erased." A long pause stretched between us. "Do you remember when we planted the fig tree?" I asked suddenly. Darren nodded. "I was 9. I dug a hole too shallow and Dad made me start over. And I told you to water it with sugar water for the first week. You thought I was trying to make it sweet." He smiled faintly. "It died anyway." "It died because we didn't listen," I said softly. To the soil, to the sun. We wanted it to grow fast, on our terms. Darren nodded again. I wanted everything fast. The house, the comfort, the praise. Chloe made it sound like it was all just waiting for us if I stopped hesitating. She was wrong. I know that now. The swing rocked gently. I slipped the ring into my coat pocket, not because I didn't want it, but because I wasn't ready to wear it just yet. I'm not asking for a place in your will, Darren said quietly, or the house. I'm not asking for anything. You already took everything that mattered, I said. My trust, my pride, my silence. I know, he whispered, but you're here. Yes, that counts for something, I admitted. He looked at me, eyes shining in the fading light. I brought dinner, he said suddenly, reaching into a bag by his feet. Just sandwiches and soup, nothing fancy. I thought maybe we could eat. One last time. One last time? He hesitated. I've decided to leave town, take a job out in Colorado, start over. I thought maybe you'd like to have a quiet meal before I go. I looked at the brown bag. No wine, no garnish, just food and an offering. I nodded. Set it on the porch table. He moved slowly, careful with the plates like they might break under the weight of memory. I watched him in silence. We ate in near quiet. Just the rustle of paper napkins and the soft clink of spoons. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But he stayed. He stayed long enough for the soup to grow cold and for the stars to blink awake above us. When the plates were cleared, he stood and reached into his coat pocket. He placed something gently on the railing beside me, his own wedding ring. I won't need this anymore, he said, and I won't wear it like nothing happened. I said nothing, just stared at the two rings, mine and his, side by side, two loops of metal that once meant forever. Take care of yourself, Mom, he said. Then he walked down the steps and into the night. He didn't turn around, and I didn't stop him. But when I picked up both rings and held them in my palm, they felt heavier than gold. They felt like closure. The beach was quiet that morning. The tide had pulled back, revealing a stretch of damp sand littered with tiny shells and bits of seaweed. I walked barefoot, letting the cold press up through my soles, reminding me I was still here, still standing, still whole. In my coat pocket was the manila envelope Boone had helped prepare. Inside, a freshly notarized will, a revised trust, a new direction. I had always thought legacy was something you left behind in photos and furniture and holiday recipes. But now I knew. It wasn't about what you leave. It's about who you choose to give power to when you're no longer in the room. That's why I didn't leave it to Darren, not after everything. Instead, I called Vivian. My younger sister arrived that weekend with a soft scarf around her shoulders, a weathered suitcase, and the same calm eyes I remembered from childhood. She smelled faintly of cinnamon and chamomile, like always, and her first words weren't questions, just a hug. She sat with me on the back deck, 2 mugs of coffee between us, the morning sun warming the wood beneath our feet. I thought I'd lost you, I said. Vivian smiled. I was just waiting until you were ready to reach. We didn't talk much that first day. We just existed beside each other, letting the silence be enough. She walked through the house slowly, noticing what was gone, what had changed, what still smelled like Rick's aftershave. Then she unpacked one small box she'd carried herself. Inside was the old rocking chair, the one our mother used to sit in after Sunday dinner, darning socks, humming under her breath, the one Vivian had rescued when the family farm was sold off piece by piece. Now it was back, cleaned, mended, and gently sanded along the arms. I figured it was time it came home, she said. We placed it at the edge of the deck, facing the sea. Not in the center, just slightly off like it always used to be, in case someone wanted to pass by without interrupting. Later that night, Boone stopped by with a bottle of cider and a pen. He watched as I signed the documents, one by one. No shaking hands, no doubts. When I was done, he nodded. It's all in place. The house, I asked, will transfer upon your passing to a charitable foundation, he confirmed, named after you and Rick, the Verna Engineering Fund. I smiled. And the board? Vivian will serve as chair, Boone said, with rotating positions for local female STEM graduates and retired educators. We raised a glass, the three of us. No toasts, just quiet sips beneath the soft whir of the ceiling fan. Later, as Vivian and I sorted through what was left of my photo albums, she asked, "What made you decide to do this?" I paused, flipping past a picture of Rick in his workshop, covered in sawdust. "Because I want my story to end with choice," I said. "Not with erasure, not with bitterness." "And Darren?" she asked gently. I shrugged. "He'll find his path, but he won't walk through mine unless he's earned it." Vivian nodded. "And Chloe?" "She'll face the consequences. The court will finish what it started, but I'm done carrying her in my chest." Vivian leaned back, letting the light of the setting sun spill across her lap. "You've always been stronger than you let people know." "I had to be," I said. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a thin, faded envelope. "I found this in one of Mama's cookbooks," she said. "She wrote it the year after Rick died. I think it was meant for you." I unfolded it slowly, my breath catching as I recognized the familiar looping cursive. "My Verna, you were born building things. Even when they broke your heart, you didn't stop. I pray you find peace in the quiet corners you've carved out. And I hope, when the time comes, you let someone else carry part of your weight. You've carried enough." My hands trembled slightly as I refolded the letter. Maybe legacy wasn't what you gave. Maybe it was what you finally let go of. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy with the past. I felt light enough to begin again. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. No press, no fanfare. Just the low murmur of lawyers and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Boone walked beside me, steady as ever, a file tucked beneath his arm filled with every detail we had gathered over the past weeks, records, transcripts, notarized affidavits, and photos that told the story louder than any voice ever could. Chloe sat across the aisle. Her hair was pinned up tightly, makeup done just enough to look composed, but not so much to look vain. She wore beige like she was hoping to disappear into the walls. Her hands gripped a folded tissue that she didn't use. Nina sat behind her, eyes down, lips thin. Tyler was absent, though his name appeared on nearly every exhibit marked by the court clerk. The judge was calm and efficient, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no tolerance for drama. She'd seen families like ours before. She didn't need the tears. She only needed the facts. Boone laid them out, piece by piece. The fraudulent medical report signed by a discredited doctor. The memo assessing property value and calculating profit margins on a home not legally theirs. The video footage Greta had provided, showing Chloe giving tours to potential buyers. The audio recording from the notary posing as an investor, in which Chloe stated that I was no longer capable of understanding legal documents. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Boone's voice did what mine could not. It told the truth without trembling. Chloe's lawyer argued miscommunication, poor judgment, a family misunderstanding that spiraled. The judge wasn't buying it. She asked pointed questions. "Did your client have legal documentation showing power of attorney?" "No, Your Honor." "Did your client verify the legitimacy of the medical assessment before acting on it?" "No, Your Honor." "Did your client profit in any way from the attempted sale of the property?" "Not monetarily, Your Honor, but intent was there?" A pause, then, "Yes." The judgment came swiftly. Chloe was found liable in a civil capacity for falsifying legal documents and misrepresentation of property status. She was ordered to pay damages, $180,000 to cover legal fees, emotional distress, and the cost of restoring the home's condition prior to her occupation. The forged medical documentation was submitted to the state nursing board for review. Her license was suspended pending investigation, and Tyler, though absent, he was barred from practicing real estate in the state, with his license flagged for review across neighboring jurisdictions. Boone had ensured the findings were sent to every applicable office. I watched Chloe as the ruling was read. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply sat there, her world shrinking minute by minute, unable to pretend anymore. After the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. No one else around. Just the echo of our footsteps and the scuff of polished shoes on old tile. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the woman standing before her. "You planned this," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "You planned this. I just finished it." Her jaw clenched. "I lost everything." "You lost what you never truly had," I said, "and you tried to take what wasn't yours." She stared at me, and for a flicker of a second, I saw the girl she might have been, before the ambition, before the entitlement, just a woman who had forgotten where boundaries end and decency begins. "I'm not the villain you think I am," she said. I gave her a long look. Villains rarely do. She turned without another word and disappeared through the exit, her heels clicking down the marble steps. Nina followed behind, silent. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. Outside the courthouse, Boone lit a cigar and offered me one as a joke. I declined, of course, but I laughed. The first real laugh in weeks. "Well," he said, "they won't be selling your house from under you again." "No," I said, "they won't." I filed a formal flag with the county. Any attempt to transfer title or power of attorney without your in-person signature will trigger a fraud alert. "Good," I said. "Let them run into walls." He smiled. "What will you do now?" I looked out at the street where the world moved on as if nothing monumental had just happened. "Rest," I said, "but not retreat. You've earned that." A week later, I received a letter from the nursing board. Chloe's license had been revoked. The record would remain public. She wouldn't work in patient care again. That same day, Boone sent me a photo. Tyler, looking sour, standing in front of a sign reading, "License under suspension, no business permitted." The law had spoken, not in anger, not in revenge, but in consequence. And for the first time in my life, I realized justice doesn't always arrive in fire and thunder. Sometimes it walks in quietly, places a folder on the table and says, "Enough." The house was mine again, not just on paper, not just in memory, but in presence, in scent, in silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a warm shawl, not the hollow kind that echoes with missing voices. It took time to clear the space of what Chloe left behind, her perfumes, her sleek modern vases, the abstract paintings that clashed with the earth tones I'd once chosen with Rick. Vivian helped for a few days, then returned to Georgia, promising to be back for the official launch of the scholarship fund. Boone visited less often now, but he still called every Sunday at noon sharp, as dependable as the tide. I began waking up early again, not out of duty, but desire. I'd make a pot of coffee, carry it out to the deck, and sit in the rocking chair Vivian had brought back. It creaked like the past, in a way that comforted rather than haunted. I'd watch the ocean breathe in and out, the gulls sweep low, the light shift slowly from gold to silver across the water. One afternoon, I heard the gate click. I stood, cautious but calm, and saw a girl, 16, maybe 17, standing just outside the fence with a sketchbook in her arms and a tote bag slung over her shoulder. "Hi," she said shyly. "Are you Mrs. Verna Whitlow?" "I am." "My name's Becca. My guidance counselor said I should come by. She said, 'You're the reason I got the scholarship.'" I blinked, then smiled. "You must be the first from the fund." She nodded. "I want to study civil engineering, like you." Something in my chest shifted, softened. I opened the gate. "Come on in," I said. "You hungry?" We shared lemonade and sandwiches on the back porch, her eyes widening as I showed her old blueprints from my early projects. She was sharp, asked about materials, load-bearing structures, even sustainability methods. She reminded me of myself, back when I believed every design could change the world. After she left, she handed me a small charcoal sketch, the view from my deck, drawn with gentle strokes and a surprising sense of depth for someone her age. "I drew it before I knocked," she said. "I wanted to remember this place whether you answered or not." I framed it the next day. I didn't need loud celebrations or public apologies. I didn't need Chloe to grovel or Darren to come back with excuses. I needed mornings like this, quiet, purposeful, true. The neighbors started waving again, not just out of politeness, but real acknowledgement. Some brought baked goods. Others just stood at the gate to say they were glad I was still here. Greta dropped off a small flowering plant for the windowsill. "For continuity," she said with a wink. One evening, I took out the wedding ring Darren had returned and placed it gently in a velvet box. Next to it, I set my own, the one I had sold and found again. 2 rings, 2 stories, one closed, one continuing. I didn't wear them anymore, but I kept them on the mantle, not for mourning, but for memory. As summer crept in, the house began to hum with a new rhythm. Not busyness, not noise, just life, unfolding gently. Sometimes people think starting over means burning everything down and beginning with ashes. But I've learned it can mean sweeping the porch, brewing a fresh pot of coffee, planting tomatoes again even if they never grow quite right. It can mean sitting in a rocking chair that creaks like home, watching the sky stretch wide and whispering to the wind, "I'm still here, and I'm not alone. Not anymore."